Hello and welcome back to Tinker Talks Guns. This time we are talking about the Swedish Husqvarna M40, the Swedish service pistol from 1940 until the 1980s. And it is a very Luger-looking pistol that is actually not at all Luger-like in its operation. So, in the early part of the 20th century, militaries were modernizing, and the Finnish, having broken away from the Soviet Union, were among those doing so. And a fellow named, and I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce this, I'm sure, Lahti designed a service pistol specifically tailored to withstand the rigors of service in the Arctic conditions that prevailed in Finnish winters, and came up with this. And they were in production from 1935 to 1951, and by all accounts gave very good service, especially in Arctic conditions. Now, in the run-up to World War II, Sweden had seen the writing on the wall and decided to upgrade their service pistols and ordered Walther P38s from Germany, which was a fine pistol, but they only got about 1,500 of them delivered before all P38 production was earmarked for the Wehrmacht, and they were out of luck. So, with some unpleasantness going on in Finland, they were unable to produce these pistols in bulk for other nations, but Swedish officers who had worked in Finland had been very favorably impressed with it, so Husqvarna licensed production. And production of these began in 1940, I believe, and they remained in service until the 1980s, by which point they were pretty long in the tooth and were suffering a lot of frame cracks, which we'll get back to. They were replaced wholesale by the Glock 19. Pretty good choice. Before we get too far into the weeds, I'd like to thank my supporters on Patreon. It's very much a shoestring operation, and your contributions help more than you know. I'd also like to thank channel benefactors, those individuals and businesses who have contributed to the channel in innumerable ways, and includes the collector who is allowing me to present this pistol to you. Who owns it? This is not my pistol. There seems to be some confusion about that in the comments, so I thought I'd make that abundantly clear. I'd also like to thank Rain City Shooting Center for providing material support for the channel. So, the Swedes adopted this pistol because of its robustness and its reliability in cold weather conditions, and produced it to a lower material spec, a lesser quality steel. Because why wouldn't you? Well, as it turns out, why you wouldn't was that when used with submachine gun spec loaded 9mm ammo, which is very, very hot, or at that time was typically very, very hot, they started suffering frame cracks. So, using the submachine gun spec ammo became a no-no, but still, in the fullness of time, frame cracks reared their ugly heads and the pistols needed to be replaced, and arguably were pretty overdue for replacement by that point. Now, I've mentioned that while it looks very Lugerish, it is very not Luger-like in its operation. It does have an internal bolt. It is a delayed blowback mechanism, and one of the features the Finnish included was a bolt accelerator. So as the barrel unlocks, a lever, sort of cam lever, no external slide drop, a sort of cam-like lever strikes the bolt face and drives it backwards to accelerate the recoil impulse to allow for more reliable function in Arctic conditions. And apparently it worked, because they made a run of guns that omitted the accelerator, and these were very shortly returned to the factory to be refitted with the accelerator. Now, the Swedish version, the Husqvarna, in addition to having somewhat inferior metallurgy, has a slightly different barrel length. This is a 4.6-inch barrel. Apparently the Lahti was much longer. Now, I've said it's not Luger-like, but it is threaded the same as the Luger barrel, and I am told will actually take Luger barrels. So, let's have a look at what it's like to shoot. So I found this gun very pleasant to fire. It has a pretty good trigger. The sights are not bad by the standard of pre-war military pistols. And what was kind of interesting is I expected a lot. Of course, I didn't expect much recoil from such a heavy gun in 9mm. And there wasn't much. I did expect more muzzle flip because there's nothing out here and all the mass is centered right over your hand. What I didn't reckon on was that with the internal bolt, there's a very low reciprocating mass. And recoil is very well managed by the weight and the way it's configured and sprung. So there was really surprisingly little muzzle flip. Overall, I think this is a great gun to shoot. Let's have a closer look at it on the tabletop. One thing that is not always apparent looking at these pistols in pictures is how big they are. They are really big. It is 9.5 inches long and fully 6 inches tall. Let's show you a government model for comparison. This gives you a good view. It is a big gun. It is also a heavy gun, weighing in at 44 ounces. Now, it does have a heel magazine release in the fashion of the time for many pistols. And this is a takedown lever. The safety is here in the rear position. You are unsafe. If the hammer is not cocked, you cannot operate the slide with the safety engaged. And it is disengaged by sweeping forward with the thumb. And it actually is pretty ergonomic. It looks a little awkward, but it's really not bad. The trigger pull is pretty good. Let me find a snap cap here, because I think it's inadvisable to dry fire these. As the piled stuff comes cascading down, and I can't get my fingers on the bullet. There we go. Okay, so we have a snap cap. The magazine is loaded by pulling down on this. And there was actually a tool that fit over the magazine to push that down, which facilitated use wearing heavy winter gloves. As I'm sure you might realize, that could be an issue in places like Finland and Sweden. So, with the snap cap in place, the safety off, the trigger pull is around 4 pounds. It's pretty crisp, and the reset is actually pretty nice. Let's get that out of here. And again, there is no external slide release, so you have to slingshot it, but that's fine. It works. And might actually be easier to use than the aforementioned heavily gloved hands. Now, the grips are black plastic and are secured after the fashion of the Luger, notching in here at the top with a screw at the bottom to retain it. There is a provision for the attachment of a buttstock. I've never seen one with a buttstock, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. And it's very nicely finished. And there's really very little way for gunk to get in the action. It's all very tight. And it works very nicely. Now, there is a lanyard ring here, which seems like a kind of weird position for it, but it really kind of makes sense, because where they're typically located on the handle, first of all, it would get in the way of the magazine catch, and second of all, it would encourage the gun to swing more if dropped to the end of the lanyard. And all in all, it's a really nice pistol. The sights they're okay. And again, they're obviously okay because I was shooting casual offhand groups like this at 7 yards. So, all in all, I really like it. It is very large and very heavy. I mean, I certainly wouldn't consider it appropriate for modern use in this day of polymer wonder pistols. But I like it quite a bit. So, the fact that it was in service for over 40 years indicates that the Swedes found it acceptable. And certainly this one is very nicely made and functions very well indeed. and is very nice to shoot. It is heavy. Now, of course, like everything else, collectors have screwed it up for everyone. These are now getting rather expensive. And I'm not sure how many were ever really imported. But neat old gun. And interesting place in history. So, that's it for this time. I hope this finds you well. Stay safe, take care, and I'll talk to you again real soon.